Thank you very much, first of all, for having accepted the invitation for this brief chat. We have KK Phoon, well known. You don't need for me to present you.
My lecture essentially thinks and reflects on whether we can do even more besides this baseline application of data.
We have maybe a few good data in everyday practice, but then we have a lot of what you call ugly data. What was that?
Data can be really good because it fits your physics. Ugly data will be something that is between good and something that I would call fake.
How would you say that decision making should or must benefit from data?
Oh, that's a great question, because actually the whole lecture is to explain that chain. The one I'm recommending in this case is that why don't we think about how we can use all this ugly data. And based on this data, you end up with a decision, a set of response or decision that's imprecise. Now, what is the purpose of making life so complicated? That would be the obvious question. You can answer a question that cannot be answered currently.
For everything, we have finite resources and then budget or time, whatever.
Yeah. So let's ignore the fact that you have a blank check. If your budget is finite, they're going to deploy your budget in a way that maximizes your decision making. So there are different parameters that could be sensitive. You only collect good data. One question. Do you combine good data with not so good data, my ugly data? Second question. Or do you throw away all the bad data or ugly data?
The answer is there if you look at those data and you combine them in a certain way. You propose.
We've been doing a good job in trying to make decisions by following the physics of the problem. We haven't been following the dimension on how you can make decision on data itself. So there's a decision on how to collect data and what data to collect. But what about monitoring data? Is that good or bad? Is that good or ugly?
Oh, that's a lot of times it's very ugly, a lot of times. But then it's necessary. If it's,
you need it.
Sometimes maybe the fear of having monitoring data that are conflicting with our models or our ways of thinking.
And that's just a joke, right? People will say that don't confuse me with data. And then you're faced with a dilemma. Data they can understand, do you want to say that they're erroneous? Because they don't agree with you.
You were mentioning the chicken and egg metaphor. What is that?
Chain of argument will be having the chicken. The chicken is the model, the method. You actually collect data to feed your physical model. Or rather, we should spend a bit of our time, maybe another fraction of the time, on the opposite direction. You have the data, so you start at the egg. I'm not making any demand on the data. The question is entirely different. Think very clever how to create the chicken to make maximum use of whatever information where you want to create the discipline. So you want to create a conceptual clarity. I use the word rules of the game in my lecture. The rules of the game in the chicken and egg dilemma is that you start with data.
I should say it depends on what you're tackling. So like when your mental model is really adequate for what you're tackling.
That's true. Your point can be summarized in something that I wrote in the paper. If you approach the problem based on the chicken to the egg, you create the chicken and then you ask for the data to analyze your physical model. That direction of argument can never improve the model. If we think that that's a good thing to have, where we have an algorithm that's constantly updating based on data. So I keep feeding data to you.
It leads to another topic altogether, and machine learning and
the dialogue,
artificial intelligence topic. You went into that by saying, humans are always there and must be there, necessarily.
Yes, you understood correctly, although I actually left that as an open question. What are the clever ways you can use with data alone, with no human? Then we ask ourselves, what is the gap? The gap should be representing something that the human should fulfill. We are not engineered to deal with zillions of data points, multivariate, deeply correlated. I think this will give us greater clarity what is exactly the role of the human engineer. I don't think we should make a judgment before we try. We are having that chat. So education itself is now coupled to this question. It
gets in because
it gets in.
But we should be leading.
We should be leading. Thank you for the word. I think we should not be waiting for things to happen. My biggest fear is for us not to change, and the career lifespan of our student is not 10 years.
Totally agree.
I keep telling people this is not just simply about research, because it's about preparing students for the future. My lecture fundamentally was to see whether I can ask colleagues to start questioning So I'm really glad to hear that that the lecture creates some
It
degree
resonates with someone for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
For sure,
Yeah,
and me,
yeah.
but I think with all many of the
Thank you.
people that listen to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this
Thank you.
chat. And
Thank you. No,
Interesting.
thanks for having me. Thank you so much.